The siren split the morning like a blade, red lights spinning against a sky the color of old steel. Tires hissed on rain-slick asphalt. Horns blared. An ambulance shot through the intersection, and a dog, mud-streaked and lean, lunged from the curb and charged after it, paws hammering the road as if his heart were a drum. He didn't flinch when the horn screamed inches from his ear. He swerved around a bus, vaulted a shattered curb, and threaded himself through the narrow corridor the city made when it parted for the emergency. People shouted. A cyclist braked so hard he skidded sideways. Someone yelled, "Hey! Get that dog!" But the dog kept running, eyes fixed, tail streaming like a flag in a storm. Is that dog chasing us? John, the driver, squinted into the side mirror. "Forget the dog," said Daniel, the paramedic in the back, bracing a hand on the gurney. "Focus on Mr. Avery's pulse. He's bradycardic." Mr. Avery, a man with a gray mustache and a life full of good stories, lay pale and sweating on the stretcher, oxygen mask fogging with shallow breaths. His fingers twitched. A family photo, him, 2 grandkids, and a lake in the background, slipped from his shirt pocket and fluttered to the floor. Forgotten. Behind them, splashing through puddles, the dog ran on. He was no one's dog, not officially. People in the neighborhood called him all sorts of things. Strider, Boots, Ghost, depending on which corner he haunted. Emma, the nurse who left her apartment early, called him something softer when she spotted him outside the bakery. "Hey, buddy," she'd say, offering a scrap of croissant. He would take it gently and sit at a polite distance, head tilted, eyes bright amber, a gentleman in a ragged coat. But no collar, no tags. Street smart, scar-nicked, ribs shadowing his sides. His name had no paperwork, but it had weight. It was the thunder in his chest and the wordless promise he carried. If he'd had a voice, it would have said Max. It was the kind of name that could push through rain and hunger and fear. This morning, before the siren cut the air, Max had been nosing along the alley behind the deli where the rain gathered in gleaming puddles. A damp cardboard box sat slumped beside a dumpster, a blanket spilling out. It smelled wrong, metallic and sour and new in a way that a cardboard box should never smell. He sniffed once, twice. The box shivered. A sound came from inside. Not a cat, not a rat. Something fragile and thin, like a bird learning its first cry. Max pressed his nose deeper. Warmth, faint as a match's first spark, brushed his whiskers. The box moved again. The instant snapped into something fierce. He dug a paw beneath the flap and dragged. He pulled until the box leaned, thumped, tipped toward the mouth of the alley. The rain washed more light into it. Another sound came, weaker now. Max growled at the storm, at the alley, at the invisible danger of time. Then, another sound. A real one, far off at first, growing. A siren. Max dropped the flap and whipped his head to the street. An ambulance streaked past the block, then slowed, clipped by gridlock, and turned onto the alley's far end to shortcut the jam. For one breathless second, it idled within reach, bumper beaded with rain, tail lights bleeding red onto the wet concrete. The back doors stood open as Daniel steadied Mr. Avery with a firm hand on the gurney rails. Max shoved the box. It scraped forward, bumped over a crack, and thudded onto the ambulance's fold-out step, just as John punched the gas and the vehicle lurched. The door swung inward, slammed, and the box slid under the stretcher, vanishing into shadows and stainless steel. Max leapt, nearly catching the bumper with his paws. The ambulance surged. He hit the ground hard, scrambled, and ran. Now, blocks later, the hospital loomed ahead, its glass facade reflecting the storm like a tired mirror. The ambulance barreled into the bay where attendants in blue smocks waited. The doors burst open. Daniel shouted vital signs. A team surrounded Mr. Avery and wheeled him toward the sliding doors. Elizabeth, an ER nurse with quick eyes, calling out, "We're ready!" "We've got him." Max darted into the loading bay just as 2 security guards stepped forward, hands out. "Whoa, whoa, dog," one said. "Back," Max didn't hear. He sprang past them, paws slapping the wet concrete, and slammed his body against the bumper of the ambulance, then whipped around and barked, loud, sharp, frantic. He ran a tight circle and returned, scratching at the rear step. His nails made a dry screaming sound against metal. "Hey!" John swung down from the cab, frowning. "Get out of here, mutt!" He's been on us for 5 blocks, John muttered to Grace, the triage doctor, who'd come out to check on the driver's report. Must be hungry. Grace glanced once at the dog. Max had stopped circling. He stood rigid, chest heaving, eyes locked on the darkness under the gurney track inside the ambulance. He pawed again, a deliberate scrape that made everyone wince. "Hang on," Grace said. She'd worked enough years to know when the ordinary hid the impossible. "Just hold on a second. He'll bite," a guard protested. "No, he won't." Grace held up a palm, gentle but firm. "Look at him." "He's pointing." Max met her eyes and whined. Just one sound, stretched thin as wire. Grace stepped into the ambulance, ducked under the frame, and peered beneath the stretcher. At first she saw only darkness and the slick glint of a dropped vial rolling back and forth with the van's motion. Then her eyes adjusted. Her breath hitched. "Daniel!" she called, voice flat and strange. "Flashlight." Daniel jogged back, clicked the beam, and followed her line of sight. The light found a corner of soggy cardboard, a scrap of floral blanket, and something impossibly small, clenched fist blue and unmoving. For an instant time stopped. "Oh my God," Daniel whispered. "It's a baby." Grace was already on her knees. "Get me a warmer. Now, Emma!" "I need you!" Emma appeared in the doorway with a thermal blanket and a portable warmer. She froze when she saw the tiny form, then snapped into motion, hands steady. Grace lifted the box out with exquisite care. The weight was feather-thin. The baby made a sound, one brittle, paper-dry squeak, and then went silent, mouth open, eyes squeezed shut as if the world itself were too bright, too loud. "Apneic," Grace said. "Pulse?" Daniel pressed the soft spot at the wrist. His face set, thready. "Maybe 60. Emma," Grace ordered. "Warmth and airway, now." They moved like a single mind. Emma wrapped the baby in the thermal blanket with the floral one sandwiched inside. Grace cleared the tiny mouth with a gentle suction, tipping the head just enough, willing the air to enter. Come on," she murmured, more to the universe than to the child. Outside, the storm pounded the metal roof. Max hovered at the bumper, trembling, rain matting his fur. He watched, eyes wide, until one of the guards stepped toward him again, hands raised. Max's lips peeled back. The smallest warning, not anger, but a boundary drawn around the fragile piece of hope inside that ambulance. "Leave him," John said, voice rough. "He brought us to this." In the span of 5 breaths, a sound shattered the tension. It wasn't a cry, not yet. More like the first tear of a stubborn seam. Then another, and then suddenly, a wail, tiny, fierce, outraged at the cold and the hunger and the strange, bright world. The loading bay shifted with the sound of it, as if everything in the building had been holding its lungs and now, finally, exhaled. Grace blew out a breath that could have been a prayer. "There you go," she said softly. "There you are." The baby's skin, once dusky, flushed a delicate rose. "Heart's climbing," Daniel said, relief loosening his brow. Emma tucked the blanket tighter, her eyes shining. "Get NICU on standby," Grace said. "We'll need labs, warming, full workup." She looked at John. "Who else was in the back?" "Just Mr. Avery," John said, bewildered. "We never saw how—" Grace turned to the dog. Max stood perfectly still, rain dripping from his muzzle. For the first time, someone really saw him. Mud, scars, the old puncture on his ear, and under it all, a posture both solemn and pleading. He looked like a soldier waiting for orders. "Good boy," she said, the absurdity of the understatement making her throat tighten. Good boy." They carried the baby inside. Max hesitated at the threshold, paw hovering, but the automatic doors, hissing open and closed on a timer, spooked him. He sat just beyond them, vigilant, the storm making a dark halo on the floor where it blew in around him. Inside, the hospital flared into motion. A rumor bloomed and traveled. Security whispered to reception to radiology, radiology to the coffee machine line. By the time the baby was in a warmer, a soft cap pulled down over a downy head, half the ER knew that a stray dog had led them to a life that would have otherwise slipped quietly out of the world. When Max didn't move, an orderly set down a stainless steel bowl and filled it from a water bottle. The dog sniffed, then drank in small, neat sips. He did not take his eyes off the NICU doors. Hours compressed into minutes. Minutes stretched into a soft eternity. The rain finally tired of its own performance and softened to a mist. Mr. Avery stabilized. He even asked Daniel, hoarse under his oxygen, "What's all the fuss?" When they told him, he smiled around the mask. "Sounds like a good dog." Late afternoon slid in like a shy guest. From the NICU, Emma came out, cap askew, cheeks pink with the strange happiness that comes when fear backs down. She crouched by the dog, holding out her hand. "Hey, hero," she said. "You waiting?" Max pressed his nose into her palm. He could smell the baby, milk-sweet and brand new, carried from the warmer on her skin. "They're calling him River for now," Emma said, glancing up at Grace, who had come to stand beside her. "Until we find anything more." "River," Grace repeated, liking the way the word moved through her.
"Found in a storm, carried by a current none of us saw. They didn't find notes in the box."
No clues. The police asked quiet questions and took quiet notes. The hospital social worker, Sarah, a kind woman with tired eyes and a pencil tucked behind one ear, promised that if no family came forward, the baby would be safe. People in the ER lingered by the NICU viewing window as if the tiny figure inside were a star in a warm glass sky. Outside the sliding doors, a small miracle unfolded in slow, practical steps. Emma called the shelter. The shelter said they were full. Grace called her friend Michael, a vet, who promised to come by after evening rounds. Daniel texted his sister, who ran a rescue. By twilight, a plan existed where none had a few hours earlier. A bath, flea treatment, a warm, dry towel, food that wasn't street scraps, a quiet corner for the night. When Michael arrived, Max submitted to the indignity of a clinical once-over with stoic grace. "Old scar on the ear," Michael murmured. "Some pressure sores at the elbows, but he's strong." "You're a shepherd mix, aren't you, buddy?" "Handsome devil." Max endured the bath with a look of betrayed dignity. He shook once, flinging droplets like glitter across the loading bay, and the guards laughed and pretended to be offended. Someone found an old towel and rubbed him dry. Someone else brought a muffin from the vending machine, which Max accepted by taking it delicately in his teeth and setting it at Emma's feet. His odd version of gratitude. Later, as the sky let down its last sigh of rain and the city uncurled itself, Emma sat cross-legged on the floor outside the NICU, back against the wall, and Max lay with his head on her lap. She ran her fingers through the clean fur behind his ear and felt the slow weight of his breathing. "Max," she whispered, testing the name, and he twitched the tip of one ear like he'd heard it before, somewhere in the long, hungry reel of his life. "Max," she repeated, sure now. "Thank you for finding River." He closed his eyes, not sleeping, just resting in that place where a creature knows it is finally, truly safe. Days turned into a kind of story. People told each other to remember that. Sometimes the world did more than bruise. The baby gained weight. He was small but sturdy, stubborn, the nurses said with fond exasperation. A fighter under 5 pounds. Mr. Avery made a full recovery and came to the window with flowers from his granddaughter, tapping the glass lightly and smiling down at the bundle in the warmer. No one came forward with a claim. No one called with a missing report that matched a baby found in a rain-wet box. The police did their due diligence and shook their heads. The social worker did hers and nodded. Papers were started. The words foster placement floated through meetings. One afternoon, as the autumn light came in honey gold through the lobby's high windows, Sarah asked Emma if she would consider being licensed as a foster. "You have the training," she said. "Infant care is hard. You already know him." And she glanced at Max, who had adopted the hospital as his temporary domain and the NICU as his cathedral. "You also have his guardian." Emma's throat went tight. She thought about the tiny fingers curling around the tip of her pinky, the way River's mouth pursed thoughtfully when he dreamed, the soft grumbles that meant exactly nothing and everything. She thought about the apartment that had felt too quiet lately, about the guest room full of boxes she kept meaning to unpack. She thought about Max, ragged sentry, stray only in the past tense, watching the world with eyes that had learned to search for a reason to stay. "Yes," she said. "I would." Grace hugged her in a burst of joy that surprised them both. "Then we'll help you through it," she said. All of us. They made it official the way hospitals make anything official. Forms and signatures and a communal cake in the break room. Someone stuck a paper crown on Max's head for a photo, which he tolerated with long-suffering nobility. When Emma finally carried River out of the NICU in a real car seat with a blanket Grace had knit on night shifts, Max walked beside her, every step measured. The living promise of that first mad run beside an ambulance. At home, Emma set the carrier on the coffee table and knelt. Max sniffed the air carefully, then lowered his head until his nose almost touched the baby's socked foot. River kicked and made a noise like a tiny debate. Max wagged once, a single calm wag that said, "I accept this responsibility." There would be sleepless nights. There would be feedings and fear spikes when the baby coughed funny, and a calendar thick with appointments. There would be new words learned together and old habits unlearned. There would be time, there would be love, the kind that grows quietly in the spaces where it's needed most. The city kept moving. Sirens rose and fell. Storms came and went. But if you stood very still in the part of the hospital parking lot where the loading bay smelled faintly of metal and rain, you could almost hear it. The echo of paws beating a tattoo on wet asphalt. A howl cut short as a dog threw himself after a vehicle, chasing not chaos but a calling that his heart understood before his mind could name it. And if you asked Grace about that day, she would tell you this. Sometimes the door you think you're opening for one emergency swings wide enough to reveal another. Sometimes what you're meant to save isn't what you set out to rescue. And sometimes the one who points you there has 4 legs and a courage that doesn't know how to stop at the edge of its own fear. Max didn't know words like fate or miracle. He only knew that the box had moved, and the air inside it had grown dangerously quiet, and the ambulance had smelled like help. He only knew that running hurt less than standing still. He only knew that when the doctors looked inside, their faces changed in a way that told him he had gotten it right. He slept that night with his head against the base of River's crib, dreaming of rain that did not chill and roads that did not end, and a siren, not a scream but a song that called him home. If this story touched your heart, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more.